All right, so welcome back everybody. Today I'm out in the Nike Vaporfly 4. This is my second run in these shoes. The first time I put them on, I ran a little over 10K, and I was moving pretty much at my 10K pace, and they felt pretty good. Now that ended up being, oh gosh, not 100% sure now. My memory's not so great anymore, but I think it was around a 7:24 mile pace, something like that. Today I'm going much slower. So for my first impressions video, I wanted to do, a little bit of speed and then do, kind of that recovery pace. That way I can give you my first impressions of these shoes across the broad range of paces. Oh, I have to say though, I'm really enjoying them. I think if you were a fan of the Vaporfly series of shoes, you're gonna really enjoy these. These are the prototype of the Vaporfly 4, a highly anticipated update to the original super shoe, one that was known for breaking records, and it has seen a number of changes over the previous version of the shoe, including the upper, the midsole, and the outsole. But did these changes make the shoe better or worse? How do they fit? How do they perform? And most importantly, are they worth the money that they're asking for them? All that's coming up, so be sure to stick around. Hi everybody, I'm Tim and this is Run Tall. If you're new here, welcome to the Run Tall family. I'm really glad that you are here and you found us on YouTube. Now I post videos all the time about running, training, recovery, and gear reviews. So if you're into that kind of thing, I want to invite you to subscribe to the channel. It's absolutely free to do and it really does help out. And don't forget to click the notification bell so you'll be notified each time that I upload new content. Now, before I get into it too far, I do want to get a disclosure out of the way. I did purchase the prototype of the Nike Vaporfly 4 with my own money. So no one's paying me to make the video, no one's telling me what to say, and no one from Nike or any place else has an opportunity to preview my thoughts before I share them with you first here on YouTube. That out of the way, let's take a real close look at the prototype of the Nike Vaporfly 4. Now to start, I did order mine true to size. For me, that's a US men's size 9 or a women's 10.5, and they fit me perfectly, both in terms of the width and the length. So my best advice is to order yours true to size, whatever you would normally order when purchasing a pair of running shoes. Obviously, if you have the opportunity to try them on first, I always encourage you to do that. But if you're purchasing them online like I did, you might not have that opportunity. So I would say go true to size. Just make sure that they have a good return policy in case you get them and they don't quite fit the way that you want them to. Now, these do retail for $260 US. Now, that's pretty much right in the ballpark. You guys know that if you're looking to buy a pair of carbon-plated racing shoes, they're going to run in that $250 on up in terms of pricing, and so I think Nike got this one just about right. They're a little less expensive than the Alpha Flies, maybe a little more expensive than some of the other carbon-plated racing shoes that are out there, but I think they got it just about right in terms of the pricing. Let's take a real close look at the upper to begin with. Now, here they had a number of changes to the upper, including to the material itself. Now, they went from having these large circular perforations, especially up around in the toe box that they have on version 3 of the shoe, to a more mesh style. So you can see, at least from a distance anyway, it kind of looks more like it's striped, but it is a mesh material that's in there. Still allows plenty of airflow. Now, I had these out in some warmer weather, not extremely hot. So I think it's worth noting that today is warmer than it has been, and the reason I want to mention the temperature is because, especially when I'm reviewing shoes, I think it's important for people to know, what the weather is like that day, because midsoles can and do react differently in, you know, freezing temperatures than those that are quite warm. Today is kind of that middle of the road. You know, it's not hot, but it's sunny, and it's about 63 degrees Fahrenheit, 64, something like that. So just thought it'd be worth mentioning here, because these midsoles feel super soft right now. Very very quick shoe, very quick shoe. I haven't run in these in the cold yet, but this is Michigan, and since it's 63 degrees Fahrenheit here, 64, somewhere around there, looking ahead even to tomorrow, we got a chance of snow. So I might very well take these out later in this week and see what they feel like in much colder temperatures. But we'll see. That's totally weather dependent. Here. And they felt really comfortable. I could feel the airflow through that upper. So I think if you live in hotter weather or you race in, you know, hotter weather, that these are going to do a really good job for you in keeping your feet nice and cool and comfortable out on the run. And those perforations continue all the way back through to the heel counter, and you can see it's translucent. You can see right through that upper. That's just how airy that it is. And it is very lightweight. Oh, so let's talk about that for a second. I kind of breezed right on by maybe a very significant part of the shoe's DNA, and that's their weight. Now, these did lose a little bit of weight over the previous version of the shoe, and they have a stated weight of 169 grams. That's less than 6 ounces. Now, I put them on my scales, and they came in even a little bit less than that, around 166 grams. But either way, you know, they are a lightweight shoe, and they definitely feel it on foot, and the upper contributes to that lightweight, airy feeling that you get with these. Now, the other piece of the upper that I want to make note of is that they did seem to make a slight change up in the toe box, where it narrows up, maybe comes to a slightly more of a point up here in the toe box than in the previous version of the shoe, which, you know, this is the Vaporfly 3, and you can see that's the circular holes I was talking about for the perforations in the previous version, and it's a little more rounded maybe at the toe cap. But not so much that it made a difference in terms of the width. I think the width of the shoe is where they need it, and they didn't change that. I still felt like there was plenty of room for me to be able to splay my toes. I didn't feel like, you know, my pinky toe was rubbing up against the material, which it sometimes can feel that way in shoes that taper a little more quickly there in the toe box, but I didn't have that sensation at all. These were really comfortable right out of the box. So got to give them to Nike there. I think they did a nice job in terms of the fit for me. Now, my feet do typically take up a little less volume in shoes, and I think that that's worth noting because oftentimes when I'm lacing up shoes, I get some puckering, especially at the start of the lace enclosure system, and that did continue in the Vaporfly 4 prototype for me, but not as severely as it has been in some of the previous versions of the shoe. Now, this is the third version again, and you know, I did loosen up the laces just a little bit here when I was taking these off, of course, but you can still see that it's got some puckering up there at the start of the lace enclosure system, and not as much in the Vaporfly 4. So the fit for me is really good on the upper, and I greatly appreciate that. Okay, so that brings us to the eyelet chain. Now, there's a big difference here, a big change. I think if you invest in the Vaporfly 4s, and you have any of the previous versions, the thing that's you're probably gonna stick out to you the most at first is the upper. They changed the lace enclosure system. It went from that kind of offset soccer style shoe to really just a traditional lace enclosure system. I like them both. They both definitely have their merits, but these are really comfortable. These are comfortable, so I don't think that was a mistake at all on Nike's part. I definitely think more runners are used to a traditional lace enclosure. Is basically, you know, straight up the center of the foot, as opposed to that offset. One thing I like about this is that my stride pods aren't sitting on a goofy angle like they do when I have them in the earlier versions of the shoe. So they're more directly in line now. Whether that makes any difference in the information it gathers, I really don't know. But it makes me feel better to know that they look properly aligned. The difference here, big change over the first 3 versions of the shoe, where they had this offset eyelet chain. It, to me, always reminded me of soccer shoes. It kind of starts on one side and it kind of went across your foot almost, for you to be able to get locked in. And you know, I know that a lot of runners in the past didn't necessarily appreciate that because it's not something that they were accustomed to. And most of us aren't when we're talking about running. You know, for runners, we're used to a more traditional style of an eyelet chain or lace enclosure system. And this offset system can be, maybe take you a little bit of time to get used to. Now, I did like it in version 3 and the previous versions of the shoe. I got used to it, I guess. And, you know, it seemed to fit me okay. I didn't have any issues with it, but I know for some runners, that was an issue, and you don't have to worry about that. So if that is something that has held you back in the past, the Vaporfly 4 has made that change to a more traditional style system here. Now, they also did include some little extra plastic overlays along the eyelet chain just to give it some structure, some durability, so you don't have to worry about your laces pulling through those eyelets at all, even when you're cinching that lace or cinching the up or down to get locked in and secure, you know, especially across the midfoot section and that kind of thing. So I think they did a good job there. I like the change to the eyelet chain. You know, sticking with a more traditional style, I think, is smart on their part. And let's take a look at the tongue now, because that's also a big change that they made. Now, the tongue is not gusseted. It hasn't been in any of the previous versions of the shoe, but because they changed and went from that offset system to more traditional, they were able to change the style of the tongue as well, because the previous version, it came up quite a bit higher, and that's simply to cover the laces so that they weren't cutting across the top of your midfoot. And I know that was not necessarily appealing to a lot of people because it came up higher on your foot. But here they were able to kind of shorten that tongue up. But still, there's plenty of it there, even if you're using a runner's knot. Because when you use a runner's knot, it brings your laces up slightly higher on the tongue. But this was tall enough that it was able to make sure that those laces weren't cutting across the top of your midfoot. And they also still have some padding up here at the top for some comfort. And they do have a pass-through here. They have two pass-throughs, really. They have a pass-through that's down here at the start of the lace enclosure system, and then they have another pass-through loop here in the center of the tongue. But I didn't have any issues in the couple times that I've had these out with the tongue migrating around. Now, in the Vaporfly 4, I've ran in them twice. I did a little over a 10K. It was it was over 6 miles, 6.5 miles, something like that. But I was running about at my 10K pace, which I think was around 7:23, 7:24 minute mile pace. And then I did a slower run. It was slightly longer, a little over 8 miles, something like that. So this is more or less my first impressions of the Vaporfly 4 prototype, and I'll bring you some additional information later on when I put a few more miles in these shoes, and we'll do a more in-depth comparison with the previous version of the Vaporfly 3 and 4, and we'll talk about how they stack up against some of the other super shoes that are out on the market as well. So all that's coming up. Just another good reason for you to subscribe to the channel. Okay, so that's the tongue. Let's take a look at the padding around the heel collar and the cup of the shoe. Now, I don't think that they made really any significant changes here. They still have plenty of padding, especially for a racing shoe. I don't know that they added anything there. You know, I took a real close look at the Vaporfly 3, which has a pretty good amount of padding there around the heel collar and of the shoe, around the heel cup of the shoe back here. But I don't really see a big change here. If they added some, it would just be a slight amount, but they really didn't need to. There was plenty of comfort built into the previous version of the shoe. So I think they got it right here, especially for a racing shoe. You want just enough to be able to keep you comfortable for that 26.2 miles and so on. Let's take a look at the structure in the heel counter. And, it's pretty minimal. I've seen a lot worse in other racing shoes. but it's not going to add a ton of stability to your run, but there's plenty there for a race day shoe. So I don't have any issues with that. You can see it doesn't take a whole lot for me to be able to collapse that heel counter with by just pinching it in. And if you had another more traditional daily trainer, sometimes I can't squeeze that together at all because there's so much structure back there. But for a racing shoe, I think they're pretty much right on target for that. Let's take a look at the midsole now. Now Nike doesn't list specifically the amount or the height of the ZoomX foam that they have, and they've continued on with their ZoomX foam. If you haven't run in ZoomX, it is a really fun midsole to run in. And, if you get a chance, I say go for it. Even if you're just testing them out at a running store event or something, that ZoomX foam is really something special to run in. I absolutely love it. Now, in terms of the stack height, I don't know that they've changed much in terms of the overall stack height in the heel. I put these up side by side, on a flat surface, and I couldn't really see much difference, if any at all. So I suspect, even though Nike hasn't stated this on their website, that they stayed with around that 38 millimeter stack height in the heel, give or take. Probably, if I had to say, maybe slightly less, but I'm going to say it's pretty close to what it was in the previous version of the shoe. So right around that, somewhere between 36 to 38 millimeters in the heel. Now, one of the changes that they did make, however, is the offset. So they went to a 6 mil offset as opposed to 8 mil. So it's slightly flatter, which gives you a little bit more of that ZoomX foam in the forefoot of the shoe. Which I think is a great place to put it, because that's where you're going to need it, especially on longer races. As you tick away the miles, that extra couple millimeters is going to feel pretty comfortable, or make it feel. Now, when it comes to the ride of the midsole, these definitely feel softer than the earlier version, and they're soft. Don't get me wrong, the Vaporfly 3 is an awesome shoe. I really like it. But these definitely feel like they have just a little bit more cushion up in that forefoot. Or if you're more of a midfoot striker, I definitely feel it there too. So I think the Vaporfly 4 is going to have a very wide appeal. They feel really, really terrific on foot. Now you can see that the design or the cutout of the foam itself has a little bit of a nod to or inspiration from the recent versions of the Alphafly. And so this is the Alphafly 3 here. You can see how they have this shelf that comes around kind of by the heel. And they have that similar design here, although this isn't nearly as wide as you have on the Alphafly. It's a little less wide than that. And there's just a little bit less of the shoe. So this is going to feel a bit more nimble underfoot, at least it did for me anyway. So let's flip it over and we're going to take a look, because this is another change that they made from the previous version of the shoe. Is, again, contoured a little bit differently here, a little bit more of a cutout here of the foam that probably didn't need necessarily. You can see that they've got extra foam here where they kind of cut some of that out. And they've also cut out the groove here in the bottom of the shoe from basically the start of the forefoot all the way back through to your heel. And that's a little bit different. You can see it's a much smaller space that they cut out here. Now you do feel that when you're walking around. It has a bit more of a squish factor because you don't have that continuous bit of foam, from here back. So you do feel that. Or I did feel that when I was, especially when I was walking in the shoe. That's when I felt it be a bit more noticeable, where it kind of compressed a bit more. It felt like it was compressing more, especially on the midfoot section of the shoe. And okay, so you can see the carbon fiber plate. That's the other change that they made, is the angle of the carbon fiber plate that's embedded within the ZoomX foam. And they have a sticker in the shoe itself that tells us what that angle is now. And it's a 20-degree angle. So it's plate 8-layer 20-degree angle. Now, I'm not sure what the angle is in version 3. So if you guys know what that is and you want to help us out, maybe list it in the comment section below. I would be interested to know what the angle of the plate was in the previous version of the shoe. I couldn't find it anywhere, but maybe you guys know and can share that with us here on the channel. That would be much appreciated. So let's take a look at the outsole material here, and that was another change that they have. Now they've got full coverage, basically from the midfoot all the way through where you toe off, and then they got a couple patches back here in the heel. But you can see that they still have that midfoot that is exposed ZoomX foam, and there's definitely some wear. Now I have 14, 15 miles on these shoes, and you can see that's already starting to look like it's been chewed up a little bit, but I'm not overly concerned. I think that that's more cosmetic than anything else. I don't think that's really going to wear away that much. And to be fair to the Vaporfly 4 prototype, some of the areas I was running in was pretty rough on any shoe because of the pavement. And they put down tar and they put rock on top of it. And so a few of the sections I ran on was some pretty rough terrain on midsole material. So it does have a tendency to chew it up. So I'm not going to hold that against them just yet anyway. We'll see. We'll see as time goes on. I put more miles in these shoes, how that holds up. I'm more concerned about the compression and compression marks over time. But I've had good luck. I've had really good luck in the Vaporfly series of shoes, over the years. Now, what's it like to run in these? These are really fun, snappy shoe to run in. I felt like they were really fast. I picked up the pace a bit just to kind of see what I could do in these shoes, and I've run some of my fastest times in them. I wasn't able to sustain that time for as long as maybe others can, but for me, I thought they did a really good job. And they felt good at slower paces. So, I was running basically at what would be my marathon pace when I'm all trained up and ready to go to race, which would be somewhere between that, 7 40-minute mile pace to maybe a 7 50-minute mile pace. Feel really comfortable at that, at that level for me. And so these are going to be a really good choice if I wanted to pick these up on marathon day. I have run marathons in the Vaporfly series of shoes in the past. The very first marathon I ran in was I had the original version of the Vaporfly on my feet at that time, and was really pleased. I was really pleased with that. And I've since run, additional marathons along the way in the Alphafly series of shoes. But I like the lightweight. They feel really good on foot, really snappy. I like the feeling of that a little extra cushion maybe up in the forefoot of the shoe. And I think what I noticed right away is that when I took them out on a slower effort and I was more solidly midfoot striking, I felt like I was getting maybe a bit more bounce from that than I was in the previous version of the shoe. These are pretty lively as well, and they feel pretty good, and they feel decent when I'm midfoot striking, but these felt to me just a little bit better, like I was getting just a little bit more out of them. And the plate angle did seem to encourage me to turn my feet over just a little bit quicker than in the previous version of the shoe. So I do think it's a really good choice, everything from 5K all the way up through to the marathon, but the future is always, that's going to be the real telltale sign is, how it does when I take these out on longer workouts and maybe on those long run days, and I can give you a better indication as whether or not they're going to hold up over 26.2 miles or not. But my instinct or my gut, my first impression is that they're going to do just fine. They're going to do just fine on those long runs, and it may very well be my next marathon racing shoe. I think this has got a pretty good competitor with the Adios Pro 4. That's a really terrific shoe, and the big brother, the Alphafly 3. That's the shoe that I typically have turned to on marathon race day. But having a lighter option on foot, boy, that's really appealing. That's really appealing. So I felt like they were really nimble, especially going around corners. I didn't feel like I was unstable at all. That's stark contrast to the very first Vaporfly shoe that was out there. I felt like that was a little bit unstable, especially cornering. So having that slightly lower stack height here, cornering, I didn't seem to have any issues with that. And I was making some pretty sharp turns in these shoes, and I think they did a really good job. So my overall opinion is to run in these. I absolutely loved them. If you're a fan of the Vaporfly series, I think you're going to absolutely love these. So overall, I'm really enjoying the ride of these shoes. I like the little extra kick that I'm getting when I'm midfoot striking, because that's really important. You get into the latter miles, especially of a marathon, you get up to, that 18, 20 mile range, and at least for me, I start to get into that marathon shuffle a little bit, where I'm maybe not picking up my legs as much as I was at the start of the race. And, my legs are starting to feel a bit heavy, and I'm more solidly midfoot striking. I'm still getting something out of the bounce in the midfoot, maybe a little more than the previous version of the shoe. So I absolutely love that feeling. And I do love the feel of that forefoot strike when I hit the ground. There's just a lot of cushion there and a lot of good snappy or bounce feeling that I get coming off my toe. So absolutely love to run in these. I think they did a terrific job with the updates. I'm really enjoying them, and I'm really looking forward to putting in a lot more miles. And this very well could be my next marathon race day shoe. So is it worth updating? Well, the Vaporfly 3 is a solid running shoe. And if you still have some miles left in yours at this point, I don't know that there is a huge need to change, unless you want a slightly better fitting shoe. If that offset bothers you a little bit, or maybe you weren't getting locked in the heel cup and you're looking to change that and get a shoe that's going to be maybe a little more nimble, a little bit better lockdown feeling, then definitely I think the Vaporfly 4 might be in your future, and definitely worth taking a look at. Hey guys, thanks for making it to the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I definitely enjoyed making it for you. As always, run tall, run strong, be kind to one another. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time right here on Run Tall with Tim.